A little over 1 year ago, I posted these 3D Kirby nails, and you guys were so sweet in the comments. You really seemed to love them. They're definitely my most popular design to date, and so I thought, why not a year later? I take the new skills that I've learned and the new products that I've acquired and see if I can make them any better. Okay, so before we start on the new design, I just wanted to show you what the old design looked like. I did happen to save this one because honestly, it's still one of my favorites. I'm really proud of how it turned out. There's lots I love about this set and some things I think I could change. Overall though, I do understand why it was so popular, so I'm curious to see how I can improve upon it. The biggest thing is going to be changing this ombre. With that new palette with the ombre gels, I think I could get even a smoother blend. And then I think I could also work on my line work a little bit, make it slightly more neat. And then I do want to try sculpting an entirely different Kirby for this nail, and also see if I could do more of a realistic take on a cake, because this one's quite cartoonish. So yeah, I do still love this design. I am just curious though to see how I can improve upon it and how I can jazz it up a little bit. Speaking of experimenting, the star of the show is going to be Christania's new Pat Art Gels. These sold out already, so she does have them available for pre-order. I believe they ship in October. I'll have to double check on the website. All of my discount links are in a link tree down below if you want to save some money, but it is a multi-purpose palette. It's marketed as an ombre gel palette, but you can do painting with it, apparently stamping too. I don't think I'm going to try out the stamping for this design at least, but I do want to try out doing some painted details with it, and then of course doing the ombres. But look at how cute it is. You get this little shaker with these cute little acrylic charms. You get a full 24 colors, a really nice variety, I think, of like neutrals, and then your brights, your rainbow colors, and these can be mixed. So this actually folds around like this, so you can do your mixing right on the lid, clean it up after you're done, but it's all in one piece, which I really like. And these gels are thick. Like, you can turn this over, fully shake it, play with the little shaker charms, and it's not moving anywhere. And then she also has available 2 types of sponges. You do get the little grabber with it too, but she has the square sponges. These are just your little mini ones, which I appreciate. I don't really like the big ones. They're just too big for my needs. And she also has the mushroom sponges. I think they make doing like the center aura look super, super easy, just because they have that round shape and you don't have to worry about getting like a nice circle with the square sponge. This is already circular, so it makes just like a really perfect aura in the center of the nail. And yeah, we will see how it goes. In terms of other products I will be using, for sure going to focus on her classic clays. They now come in 10-gram jars, which is awesome. You get more bang for your buck. And I think she reformulated some of the colors, so you get some new colors if you buy the whole set. But the packaging is just too adorable. They also have their own little lid, a little stopper in here, which I love. So I'm definitely going to use these for my 3D sculpting, along with potentially some of her Very Sweet Dreams pastel collection. And I think I want to use this angel cake color for the actual cake slice that I'll be making. I think it'll be perfect for that. And then for the base colors, I have the Divock Summer collection from the 4th season set, and this is number 52. This is like a super pretty sheer watermelon pink, and I just want it as kind of like a tint to go on the back of the nails. And then instead of doing a plain background with these like white details, I wanted to use a glitter polish and play around a little bit with some transparency in this design. So this is the Yogurt Nail Glitter number 60 from the Orgel collection. It's like a really pretty chunky glitter. Of course, what's a cake without frosting? This is my favorite white texture gel. It's the white from the Divock Canvas mini set. I love this stuff. As you can tell, I'm running low, but I use it for like all of my white textured looks. And then for tools, there's nothing really specialty that you need, just some liner brushes and silicone tools. I'm gonna use my Crestania silicone tools because they are nice and small for getting those really fine details sculpted. And then for liner brushes, I love my Diami long liner. This is number 9. This is gonna be for those really long swirly lines. And then this is actually a recent purchase, but this is the 6mm short liner brush from Crestania, and it is definitely the thinnest liner brush I own. And yeah, that's basically it today in terms of supplies. So let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. Okay, so I'm starting with my pre-prepared tips. As always, these have already been chemically etched, and then I did paint a layer of base coat just to smooth out the surface. And I'm going to go in with 2 layers of this pink color. It's like a really gorgeous watermelon pink from the summer collection from Divock. And I'm putting this over the 3 nails that I want to have the pink glittery base, just to kind of amp up the color of the glitter itself. I don't want the glitter layer to be too thick, so I'm doing this as a base instead of doing multiple layers of the glitter, just for a little bit more opacity with that gorgeous pink color. I love the Divock formula. It's honestly so freaking smooth. I am happy every time I use it. You can get really nice even color payoff, which can be difficult sometimes with syrup gels because they are so sheer. Any unevenness is going to be super noticeable, but not with these ones. They just work so well. I highly recommend, especially the summer set from the 4 Seasons collection. So pretty. I do have a code with Sweetie Nail Supply if you're interested in ordering it. Speaking of which, I also got these glitter gels from Sweetie Nail Supply. This is the Yogurt Nail Ore Gel collection. I will be using 2 in this design, the silver glitter and this pink one here that matches so well with that Divock base. I'm just going to do 1 even thicker layer of this over all of the pink nails. I just wanted a little bit of glitter. And this formula is quite thick. The viscosity, I would say, is like a medium to thick viscosity, which means that you can move the glitters around to your liking and they'll stay in place. So I do that and I cure, and that's the base layer done for those nails. Now on to the ombre using these Pat Pat gels. This is going to be my first time trying out this palette and I'm super excited. One of the things I really like is that you can custom mix colors. So I'm just going in here with a silicone tool, taking a bit of white, adding one of the more vibrant pinks, and then I use just a teeny tiny touch of yellow to make that slightly more warm toned. And these mix together super easily. It's a thicker consistency, so it was kind of like mixing a paint. And then I started with one of her round sponges because I love using round sponge for the aura look. It just makes it so easy because that shape is already there. And I tap it into the gel, and then I make sure to tap the excess off on a palette. I personally like doing it this way. You can go in with more product straight onto the nail and blend it out, but I personally prefer just working in layers to get a really nice soft blend. And while I did like the round sponge, I quickly realized it was just too big for the design that I wanted, so I went back in with one of the smaller square sponges. This was perfect. I need to fit 4 colors on here, so I just couldn't have too big of a pink space. But look at how nicely that blends out. It's such an easy, quick way to get the airbrush look without having to dig out your airbrush paints. Speaking of which, please, if you are going to airbrush, make sure that you're using actual airbrush paints and not mixing gel with acetone. It's so bad for your lungs to be breathing in any sort of aerosolized gel. So that's just my little PSA for this video. Oh, along with always make sure that you're wearing gloves when possible, nitrile to avoid contact with uncured gel. Just make sure you're doing your research to stay safe so we can all DIY nails for as long as possible. Anyway, I cured that pink layer. I actually did about 3 layers of the pink, and then I went in with a couple layers of the yellow as well. I'm working on both the pointer and the pinky finger at the same time, so you'll see me switching between the 2 of them. And again, the key here is to cure in layers. So I will start by stippling on the biggest area, the widest I want the color to be on the nail first, and then I'll go in with extra layers where I really concentrate that color in the center of the aura to really brighten up that middle while keeping those edges nice and soft and blended. Of course, the layers should be cured in between, and you really don't want to wipe this with alcohol. or cleanse the aura until you protected it with a top coat or something like that. I've noticed with all of these different pat gels that if you do try to cleanse it, it will take away some of the pigment. I think, and this is just speculation, but I assume it's probably going to be because they're so pigmented that a lot of the formula is a pigment that doesn't necessarily cure to the nail per se. And so when you wipe it, you're taking some of that pigment away. So yes, when you're done with your aura, with your ombre, with whatever you're doing with these pat gels, just make sure that you seal in that design with a top coat or even another base layer before cleansing the surface. But I added a little bit of purple to the mix and these came out so nice. I love the way that they blended, made the process super easy. I remember in my original set struggling to get the blends to look really nicely with the syrup gels, so this part was a breeze. And now I'm going in with the silver glitter from that Orgel collection from Yogurt Nail, and I just wanted to cover the clear spots of this nail just to tie in that glitter from the other nails. So I just dabbed on the glitter where I thought it looked good. I tried to get a little bit of it over some of the colored areas so that it looked really blended and natural, or I guess as natural as a rainbow glitter nail can be. And then once I cured that, I actually went in and smoothed out the surface with a pretty thick layer of base coat. I knew I wanted to paint on the white swirls, and for really clean lines, you do want a really smooth surface to work on. So I took a base polish. This is just the Liuwa Zero base. And I actually kind of did like a builder gel overlay almost, where I added a thicker layer to really get a nice, seamless, smooth surface. You could use top coat here, but sometimes I don't like using top coat because I feel like it's almost too smooth. I do like a little bit of tack to paint on. So I gave that a full 60-second cure. And then I wiped down all of my nails with alcohol. And now we can get to the nail art. So I'm starting with that long liner brush. It is one of my favorites. And I just dipped that straight into the white from the pat gels. And I did drag this onto a palette just to clean off some of the excess. When you're painting really thin lines, you don't want a big glob of paint at the end. And about here, you can see why I actually smoothed out the surface of the nail. I must have not put enough towards the tip because there was a little bit of a divot where that sequin is, and it interrupts the flow of the lines. So if you want to paint nails, you want them to look super smooth, and you want your details to be sharp, just make sure you're working on a surface that in and of itself is already smooth. But I am really happy with these lines. I think in comparison to the previous set, I can definitely tell that these are much less shaky, and maybe that was just the way that I was painting on that day. But I like to chalk it up to a lot of practice. The right type of brush, a really nice skinny long liner brush, is my preferred go-to for these types of swirls. And then the product as well. I find that thicker painting gels are better for really thin lines because they do hold their shape really well. A thicker painting gel is not going to move around a bunch. It's not going to glove on the end of your brush if you get a little bit too much product on there. So yes, if you're going for really even line work, I think the right products is definitely something to invest in, and it's going to very much make your job easier and improve your art quality as well. So after I'm happy with my lines, I give them a full cure and then I go in with a dotting tool. Now I will say, I think this gel is slightly too thick for a dotting tool. If you can see, my dotting tool is kind of like pulling away some of the product. So I would maybe thin it out with a little bit of clear before using a dotting tool, but this was just the center of the star, so it was fine. I take that liner brush and I just drag from the center outwards, keeping my brush almost perpendicular to the nail. That way I can kind of do most of that line work with my wrist itself instead of having to drag my whole hand, and it just gives you really clean lines. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe you can see what I'm talking about here, but you want your brush almost pointed straight down at the nail and just kind of drag towards yourself, and that will give you really, really nice straight lines. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, I did go in with my dotting tool again, just add a couple little stars here and there. On the pinky finger, I also did some more 4 and 8 pointed stars. These are both the most nerve-wracking and the most satisfying thing I think to do in nail art. I don't know, I get a lot of serotonin from completing one, having it look really nice and symmetrical, but oh boy, am I always holding my breath and struggling through them while I'm painting them. But I definitely noticed an improvement here because usually I have to do stars multiple times. This time I did not have to do that. I got them all done in one go. So I fully cure that and our base art is done. Now I can move on to the 3D. I'm just pulling out the products here that I think I'm going to use. I pulled out Angel Cake from Chrisania's pastel collection. I thought this would be perfect for the little strawberry shortcake slice. And then I also grabbed her classic collection, and I'm going to be using a mix of the light pink and the nude pink for Kirby. Of course, I need the white and also the yellow for the stars. I did grab my yellow from her collaboration with Ball Pit Nails. This was from this past winter, and these are like a clear jelly colored clay, and they have sparkles in them as well. I thought that this might be really cute for the star and the moon, but when I looked at my nail and I saw how much glitter was already on it, I just thought it might clash a little bit, so I did go with the opaque clays instead. So these as well, you can custom mix colors. I love these because they're not sticky whatsoever. They are like a true clay consistency, think like Play-Doh. It's not going to be the same experience if you're used to kind of those like stretchy, almost rubbery clays from Korea, though she does now have two versions of that, in a milky white and a clear. These are going to be very stiff, very much like traditional clay, and I like that for more complex shapes. You can get some really fine details with this type of clay. So I'm just taking some of the yellow and some of the pink, some of the white, and I'm gonna mix that together. I was going for like a nice buttery yellow. I just personally need this with my hands. I am wearing nitrile gloves. Please make sure, even though these are HEMA-free, that you are wearing gloves whenever you're handling uncured gel. And honestly, I probably switch out gloves 3 or 4 times a set because even though I'm wearing nitrile, some of the chemicals, they can start to leach through the nitrile after time. So I do pretty regularly change my gloves as well. I'm not trying to scare you or anything. I just personally like being on the safe side. So I finally got to a color that I thought I was happy with, and I roll it out into kind of like this long noodle shape. This is going to be the base of our moon, and I just shaped this onto the nail itself. I did sculpt on the nails themselves this time because I kind of knew how big I needed to make the charms, having done the set before. Usually I will actually sculpt on a separate nail tip, a dual form, or a tip covered in tin foil, or even like an acrylic nail form. But this time I felt confident enough to do it on the nail. So I just flatten out that moon, I go in and I shape it with my silicone tools. Here I was feeling it was honestly a little bit too chunky, a little bit too big. I needed enough room for Kirby to sit there. So I did end up taking off some of the clay just to thin it out a bit. Another reason I love this clay is it's super easy to clean up. You can just take a tool with a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it and wipe the surface, and it's going to get rid of any residue that's left over. This here is Chrisania's sculpting brush, and I really like it for smoothing out my shapes. So when I'm happy with the overall shape, I'll go in with this brush, just wet with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. And it just gets rid of any ridges or bumps that you might have made while sculpting. So I gave the moon a full cure, and now I'm going in to make our little Kirby, our little sleepy boy. So I started with the light pink, and it's quite bright, so I did want to tone it down with just a little teeny tiny bit of the nude pink as well. I mixed that together with some white. I forgot to show it on camera, but I did add just a touch of purple too, just to kind of cool down that color a little bit. But once I was happy with the tone, I took a little ball and stuck it to the nail right in the center of that moon. This is going to be his little body. Again, smoothing it out with that brush wet with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. I do think in hindsight I should have made his body more of an oval, so it looked like he was slouching, sleeping, but that's okay. Something to improve upon next time. Anyway, here I'm adding his little arm, smoothing it out again with the brush. And then, of course, he's got to have his bright red feet. I actually don't know. Are these his feet or are they shoes? Does Kirby wear shoes? Okay, so I had to do a little bit of research because my brain just could not let go of this question. Apparently they are his feet. He is not wearing little like red or dark pink slippers. but I try to get like the flat shape to indicate that they're pointed up. And so I took the spatula, flattened out the back end. The clay, when you work with it, if it's a really bright color, it might bleed a little bit, but you can just wipe it away with alcohol. And then I took a super thin layer of the white clay and I molded it around his head to create his little sleeping cap. The first time I did this set, I did shy away from doing the sleeping cap. I thought it would be too much detail, too hard, so I really wanted to push myself this time to include that hat. I added a little bit more clay as necessary to get coverage over his whole little noggin. And then unfortunately I did go off camera, out of frame for a little bit of this, but I just added a triangle to indicate like the floppy little tip of the sleeping cap. I just blended that in with the rest of the hat and then gave him a little pom-pom at the end of that triangle. And then I fully cured all this and set it aside for now because we're going to move on to the middle finger and do the little star wand. So I'm rolling out that same yellow into a little ball, putting it on the nail and just pressing it to flatten it to create a little disc on the surface. And then I'm taking my spatula and I'm going to flatten the sides of the circle to create a pentagon. This is going to be the base of the star shape. A little tip is if you start at the bottom and then do the two top sides to create like a peak in the middle, it just gives more of an even pentagon. Two very different things. So yeah, start at the bottom and then do the two slanted top sides, then do the bottoms. And then I'm just taking a chisel tip silicone tool and I'm just using that to kind of bring in the middle of those sides to create an even more distinct star shape. I'll zoom you in here and show you a little bit closer. But now I'm just using a cone tool and I'm just further defining the little arms of the star. I would not use this method if you're doing like a very pointed star. I'm doing a little chubby one, so it's okay if it's not super defined. If you're doing a more defined star, there's probably a better method for this. This is just what I came up with for this design. And then of course, smoothing everything over with my brush. And our star is done, so I give that a full cure. And as with the first iteration, the only part that I didn't hand sculpt myself are the wings. So these are pre-made charm. I'm just gluing them on with a little bit of the Ivy Fix gel. I think I got these off of Ali, maybe Temu. If you just search up wing nail charms, I'm sure you'd be able to find something similar. I do also have a mold, so I could have done them myself, but I figured why not use up some of my charms since I have them. And then just to flatten out the surface of where those two wings came together, I pulled out my Melody Susie nail drill. This is the SMF 200, I believe. The Plus, I really like it. It's a good beginner drill. It's smooth, it's not too loud, and it's not too expensive. But I just took down the tips of the wings where they were kind of sticking up from being glued on at an angle. This will just make it easier for me to add the charm at the end. And then I just try to wipe away as much of the filing dust as possible with a little lint-free wipe. You can see from this angle how much that really smoothed out the surface, just so I didn't have things poking up. And then I moved on to what was supposed to be the easiest part about this charm was the little wand handle. I executed this flawlessly before. I don't know what happened this time, but I rolled out my little log, I placed it on the nail, and I patted it down. Apparently, I placed it crooked though. I guess you can kind of tell here. I don't know if it was just the angle that I was looking at it from. It looked straight to me, but unfortunately, when I went to look at it after I'd already done all the shaping, and I thought I was happy with it, it was crooked. So I was not amused, but at that point I just said, you know what, I have to get this done, so I'm going to be okay with it. But now it's time for the final sculpture, the cake slice. So I'm pulling out Angel Food Cake from the pastel collection, and I did initially shape this off the nail, so I just made the little cake slice shape, which is a rectangle with a crooked triangle on top. That's the best way I can explain it. And then I peeled it off the palette and then applied it to the nail. I just find it easier to get straight lines on a flat surface versus a curved surface. I did go in and do a last bit of shaping just to make sure those lines were nice and crisp. And then of course, smoothed everything out before going in with one of these like dust cleaner brushes. These have plastic bristles that you can sort of like pat into a gel before you cure it and give it a really nice texture. Maybe not nice if you have like trypophobia. I'll try to remember to put a warning. But I find it creates really good like cake, cookie, baked good texture as well as fur. But once I added the texture, I just went in and kind of mapped out where I wanted to put the frosting eventually. I added the grooves because I wanted the frosting to look like it was actually part of the cake, like it was sitting in between the layers, and so I didn't want to just lump it on top. So I just made the little grooves, and then I gave this a nice full cure in my lamp. And since I was going for realism here this time, I decided to make a realistic leaf and little strawberry. So I took the teeny tiniest pieces of the white clay and I just rolled them out into little balls, shaped them into a strawberry shape, and then two little leaves. This part is always a little tricky because you are working on such a small surface. But I don't know, there's just something so satisfying about miniatures. I personally love miniature things. I'm such a sucker for cute little tiny things. I used to actually collect mini mugs whenever I would travel instead of shot glasses. My mom would not allow little 7-year-old me to collect shot glasses, but mini mugs were okay. So I'm just taking this super small chisel tool from Croissant and I'm adding the little leaf veins. Just, again, another added touch of realism. I do think I made them a little bit too deep. The paint kind of pooled in them when I went to paint on the details, so maybe a little shallower if you're going to do this yourself. But I cured those and then brought out that art gel again. I'm going to use these to paint on the details. So I started by mixing the bright red with just a teeny tiny touch of brown for like that nice deep strawberry red. And I painted around the edge of the strawberry first, getting a nice thin outline. This is going to be the strawberry skin. And then I do bring that color a little bit in towards the center. Not too much, just a bit around the edges. If you look at the inside of a strawberry, there's kind of like that white middle and then the hollow section. To make that hollow section, I just brought in that red. And then I started feathering that paint from the edges towards the middle and blending that middle out towards the edges. And I think this is a pretty realistic looking strawberry. I then realized though most strawberries are kind of like white towards the leaf area, so I wiped off the red from the top of the strawberry and then cured it before I moved on to the leaves. This is a custom mix of just two of the different greens, the bright neon green and the more muted forest green. And I just paint that over the little leaves. And while I had the palette out, I decided I wanted to add a little bit more depth to the cake slice. So I took one of the sponges and just did this by hand, dunked it in one of the browns, and just tapped on a super thin layer over the cake just to, again, give it a bit of depth, make it look like some spots were a little bit more baked than others. And then I took my little charms and I flipped them over, clean them off. You do want to clean off any uncured gel, any residue, and then I stuck them on a nail stand and painted the backs. Hindsight, I don't think this was necessary, but I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to see the back from the front of the nail with the way that I am going to attach them, so I just did it as a precaution. So I then cured those little charms and worked on my Kirby hat. Here I'm just painting the whole hat purple. I'm using the Gina painting brush that I recently got. It's the short liner. I actually really like it because it has a thicker end. You can get some nice precise details but also cover larger areas super easily. So I cured that and then moved on to the face. I'll be honest, I don't have much footage from the face because I had to get really close up to look at it and be precise. So this is really all I have. But it's basically two little curves for his sleepy eyes and then a dot for his mouth. And then I just went in with a dotting tool and a bit of sheared out pink for his little rosy cheeks and another larger dotting tool for the spots on his hat. The white I did thin out a little bit. This is actually from the stars that I made earlier. And he's all done, so onto the wand, I just added the red stripes. This stuff is so pigmented, you can see here, this is just one layer. You can easily get full coverage with a single layer. Since it is thicker, you might have a little bit of texture, but that all disappears when you top coat it anyway. If you, for some reason, do feel like you need more coverage, definitely recommend though working in 2 thinner layers rather than 1 thicker. Because it's so pigmented, you just want to make sure that you can cure all the way through. And then here, I'm just adding a little sparkle to the center of the star. I don't know, it felt like a big space that didn't have anything in it, so I wanted to fill it up. I don't know, I honestly kind of like the simplicity of the wand without it, but you guys let me know, do you like the little starburst in the center, or do you like it just plain? After painting on the star though, and fully curing those details, it's time to glue on our gemstone. So I'm taking my IV Fix gel, just adding a little bit to the end of the wand, and then I pull out my crystals, and I just want something big enough to hide the connection point of the wings and the wand. So I just plopped that down and positioned it, cured it into place, and this nail is all done for now. Since I added that little starburst on the star, I decided to go back in and add a few little details to the moon too. As a design rule, I try to incorporate an element at least twice on a nail design. That way it feels like there's some consistency between the different nails. So if I use glitter, I'm going to try to use it on 2 nails in some way or another. If I use cat eye, I'll try to use it on 2 nails. If I have some sort of white detail, I'll try to make sure it's incorporated in at least 2 nails, and that's just my personal philosophy to design. Although I do want to experiment and do like a fully different design for each nail at some point. I am just not there yet. But now I'm going in with one of my favorite texture gels. This is the Develk White from the Canvas collection. Although you can buy it individually, I'll leave the links to everything down below along with my discount code for Sweetie Nail Supply. But I just applied this into the little grooves and on top of the cake for the frosting. This stuff is nice because it holds its shape fairly well while still having a little bit of self-leveling. And before I cured that, I stuck the strawberry slice and the little leaf into the uncured gel. I'm going to use this as almost a glue to keep those in place. And then I gave that a cure, and then I realized this stuff is also non-wipe, so I can do it as a last step. So I went ahead and I top coated the rest of the nail. At this point, I did leave the cake matte. In hindsight, I decided I wanted to have it glossy to match the rest of the set. So off camera, I do end up painting over the cake eventually. But for now, I left it matte, covered the strawberry slice though, and the little leaf. And then once I cured the top coat, I went back in with more of the frosting and just made sure that I really attached those little charms well, and made this cake look super scrumptious, like it had piles of fresh whipped cream on top. And again, because this is non-wipe, I could do that as a last step and keep that really nice texture. So at this point I said, okay, I guess it's just time to top coat everything. So I went in with my zombie top. This is from Yogo. And because these charms are so chunky, I wanted a thicker top coat to be able to really seal them in. So I painted on a layer of that. While it was uncured, I just filled in some of the gaps with my IV Fix gel. That's non-wipe as well. And then I cured both those together. I find that's a surefire way to get your charms to stay in place. Paint on the top coat, add your glue, whatever you're going to use to fill in the gaps between the charm and your nail, and then cure everything together. So I'm doing the same thing for our little Kirby here, just giving it a nice healthy top coat of that Yogo zombie. And then once I cured that, I went in with that same texture gel, and I'm adding his little fuzzy brim and pom-pom to his cap. This gel, if you kind of like poke it in place, if that makes sense, if you tap it in place, you'll get some really nice little spikies that mimic kind of like fuzz. So that's just what I'm doing here. And then these last 2 nails were super satisfying to top coat. I just gave them a nice smooth topping, adding a little bit of extra in the center just to reintroduce that nice apex shape, that nice curved shape. And with that, we are actually finished with the set. I think it took me about 6 hours. That's what I have in terms of footage at least, which I believe is on par with the last time I did this design. So let's talk final thoughts. Okay, so here is the original versus the redesign. I have thoughts that I will go through with you guys. The first one being I am really proud of some elements of this new set, but I actually kind of think I like the original better. I don't know. So with the original, there's definitely like a sense of whimsy with how cartoonish things look. Like the cake, I originally thought I wanted to do something a bit more realistic looking, but I kind of like the look of the more simplified cartoony cake, at least for this design. But now let's talk about what I do really like here in terms of improvement. So one thing I can see right away is that I do believe my lines are cleaner in this new version. And I'm pretty sure I was using the same brush, so it's not a different in brush, but it is a difference in how I paint lines, how kind of like steady my hand is after a lot of practice. I do like the little added starburst on the star here. I think that's a cute touch. I am a big fan of this upgraded Kirby. When I was making this set the first time, I definitely shied away from the hat. This original Kirby here, he was wearing a hat as well, but that level of detail I felt was too much for me at the time. So I'm proud that I went ahead and tried it this time, and I think it came out so adorable. So I do like my new Kirby, and I actually do really like the blends of those ombre gels. So yeah, overall this was a really fun experiment, and I hope that if there's one takeaway from this, it's that everybody has room to grow. If you are a beginner and you are just starting out and you see other people's work and you wonder, man, how am I ever going to get to that level? Because that's where I was. That's where I was when I started. There were people I was just absolutely in awe of. And I feel like every day I get a little bit closer to my end goals. But realistically, my end goals are always changing. But I'm also not afraid to admit that there are some things I like about the original better. And I think it's okay to be critical as long as you're not being too self-critical and stunting your growth by putting yourself down so much that you don't even try new things, because that's how we all learn. So yeah, I really appreciate you all for joining me on this journey, for just being so supportive and so kind along the way. If you are interested in trying any of the products yourself, recreating any part of this design, I'd love to see it. I do have my design templates linked below in a shared drive folder that you can use. I also have all my discount codes in a link tree if you would like to pick up any products and save yourself some money. But I feel like I've done plenty of yapping for this video, so I hope you are having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will see you all for the next one. Bye!